John was an ambitious and dreamy young man. He had grown up in a small country town in North Carolina, always yearning for adventures beyond the hills that surrounded his home. He had deep brown eyes and a smile that radiated warmth. Claire, on the other hand, was a talented artist, born in Paris in France, was a woman full of creativity and sensitivity. Her blonde hair shone in the sun, and her green eyes were like windows to a pure soul in love with life. It was the end of the year. Another year had passed and John felt that he had done nothing. He was still stuck with little Brandon, stuck in the same place. He was tired of all that. The year was already at its end and he had done absolutely nothing. It seemed that the world was spinning, and John always remained in the same place. And it really was like that. 2 years ago, life seemed to throw him in other directions. But at that moment, he had already lost hope again. When it seemed that I had control over life, she showed him that he had absolutely no control. He needed to find a way to go around the world again. He needed to feel the power of life, and he knew exactly how to do it. He had felt it again. He needed to get back on the road, just as he had done 2 summers before when he crossed the entire east coast of the United States. And it was already at the end of that year that he left, giving up the comfort that only caused him discomfort. He was still young, but he would not waste any more time. College had never made sense to him, and in recent months he had done even less. He felt more and more caged, tamed, and he had never been a prisoner of anything. He didn't carry much in his backpack, just a tent, some clothes. Of money he had almost nothing, only a few dollars that he had saved in the course of that year, but he would know how to turn around if he had to. The place chosen for the trip was the Brazilian Amazon. He longed for contact and experience in the forest. On the day of his departure, John felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The airport was crowded and noisy, but he remained focused on his mission. His flight would take him to Manaus, the capital of Amazonas state. From there, he would go by boat to the small village of Novo Arraial, where the hostel was located. During the flight, he couldn't stop thinking about what awaited him. He closed his eyes and imagined the green immensity of the forest, the rivers winding like pulsating veins in the heart of the earth. Upon arriving in Manaus, John was greeted by a wave of heat and humidity that made him sweat instantly. The city was a contrast of modernity and lush nature. He felt a little lost, but also clarivilhado with all that. After a brief stay in the city to get used to the new environment, he boarded the boat that would take him to his final destination. The journey down the river was long and exhausting, but John could not tear his eyes from the landscape. Each bend of the river revealed a new scenery of indescribable beauty. The dense vegetation, the exotic sounds of the animals, everything was an intense sensory experience. He met other volunteers on the boat, each with their own stories and motivations for being there. They shared laughter, expectations, and even some doubts about what awaited them. Finally, after hours of sailing, the boat reached the village. It was a small and simple place, but cozy. The wooden houses, built on stilts to avoid the floods of the river, gave a rustic charm to the place. Children played barefoot on the dirt streets, and adults greeted newcomers with genuine smiles. John was introduced to the owners of the hostel, a couple of friendly Brazilians in love with the forest. They welcomed him warmly and guided him on his responsibilities. The hostel was a rustic but charming building, surrounded by towering trees and a variety of exotic plants. John settled in his room, a small wooden hut, simple but comfortable. He knew those 4 walls would be his home for the next few months. John began his routine at the hostel the very next morning. Their tasks ranged from cleaning the rooms to helping in the kitchen, where they prepared simple but delicious meals using local ingredients. He tried his best, determined to do a good job and to learn as much as possible about the culture and environment around him. The days were intense but rewarding. He was captivated by the flora and fauna around him, and each new discovery was a small adventure. Hard work and warm nights in the Amazon began to shape John, strengthening him both physically and mentally. It was on a rainy afternoon, when John was at the reception of the hostel, that life reserved a surprise for him. A tall woman with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes walked through the door, followed by an older lady who appeared to be her mother. Both were wet from the torrential rain falling outside. "Bonjour!" exclaimed the young woman, smiling at John. "Bonjour," John replied, recalling his few French lessons at school. "Can I help them?" "Yes, of course," she said with a slight French accent. "We have a reservation. My name is Claire, and this is my mother, Monique." John searched the logbook and found the reservation. "Oh, yes, here it is. You guys are staying for a week, right?" "That's right," Claire replied, as she helped her mother sit up. "This is our first time in the Amazon. We're very excited." John smiled and handed them the keys to the room. "You will love it. If you need anything, just call me." Later that night, as John helped serve dinner, he saw Claire and Monique sitting at one of the tables. They looked tired, but happy. Claire waved at him, and he approached. "Dinner's great," Claire said, as Monique nodded. "Thank you," John replied. "We try to use fresh, local ingredients whenever possible." Monique, who had been quiet until then, raised her eyes and spoke with a warm smile. "The food is clairvoyant. We look forward to exploring the forest." Claire continued the conversation. "Have you ever been to the forest? It seems to be an amazing place." "Yes, sometimes," John said, feeling more at ease. "It's really impressive. There is so much to see and learn. Tomorrow, for example, we will go on a guided walk. Are you interested?" "Definitely," Claire exclaimed, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "My mother always dreamed of seeing the Amazon up close. And so am I, of course." The next morning, Claire and Monique joined the group for the hike in the woods. John, who now also helped as a guide, felt more confident with every step he took. He watched Claire and Monique with curiosity. Claire was full of energy and curiosity, always asking questions, while Monique seemed to absorb every detail in silence with a quiet smile on her face. During a pause, Claire approached John. "What brought you here? It seems so far from the United States." John laughed. "I wanted a change of scenery, something completely different. And here I am." "You made a good choice," she said, looking around. "This place is magical." "I agree," John said, sensing a growing connection with Claire. "And you? Why Amazon?" "My mother always wanted to come," Claire explained. "After my father passed away, we decided it was time to fulfill some dreams. And here we are." John felt a surge of empathy. "This is incredible. It takes courage to follow your dreams." Claire smiled, grateful. "Yes, it is true. What about you? What is your dream?" John thought for a moment. "I think I'm finding that out now. Every day here is a new adventure." As the days passed, John and Claire spent more time together, exploring the forest and sharing stories. Monique, though more reserved, watched with approval the friendship that was forming between the two young men. One night, after dinner, Claire and John sat on one of the wooden benches outside the hostel. The sky was clear, full of stars, and the sound of the forest was almost mesmerizing. "I never get tired of this place," Claire said, looking up at the sky. "It's so different from anything I've ever known." John agreed. "It's really special. Sometimes I feel like I'm in another world." Claire turned to him, her gaze intense. "I'm glad I met you, John. You made this experience even more unforgettable." John felt his heart race. "Me too, Claire. I'm glad you and your mom came." The silence that followed was comfortable, full of possibilities. Both knew that this moment would mark their lives forever. The next morning came with a clear sky and fresh air that seemed to promise a new beginning. However, for John, the atmosphere was tinged with a melancholy that he could not shake off. Claire and Monique were leaving. They had packed their bags and were preparing to leave the hostel after an intense week of adventures and new friendships. John helped load the bags onto the boat that would take them back to Manaus. Claire was next to him, trying to keep her spirits up, but he could see the sadness in her eyes. Monique, always kind, thanked everyone at the hostel for their hospitality. "Thank you for everything, John," Claire said, holding his hand for a moment. "You made this experience unforgettable." John tried to smile, but felt a lump in his throat. "It was a pleasure to meet you and your mother, Claire. I will never forget those days." She smiled sadly and, with one last hug, climbed into the boat. As the engine rumbled and the vessel pulled away, John waved until they were out of sight. He stood there, staring at the river, feeling more alone than he had ever imagined he could feel. The following days were difficult. John continued with his duties at the hostel, but everything seemed to have lost some of its luster. The laughter and conversations with Claire had filled a void he didn't even know existed, and now, without her, loneliness consumed him. He found himself thinking about her constantly, reliving the moments they shared, the conversations, the looks. Work that had once been a welcome distraction now seemed a constant reminder of what he had missed. The nights were even worse. Lying in his hammock, surrounded by the sounds of the forest, he felt overwhelmed by Claire's absence. The sound of crickets and night birds that had once comforted him now seemed to accentuate his loneliness. He remembered the conversations they had under the starry sky, the moments of shared silence that were as meaningful as any words, and blamed himself for not having taken any initiative. Despite trying to focus on work and the new people arriving at the hostel, John couldn't help but compare everyone to Claire. No one had that twinkle in their eye, that insatiable curiosity, that ability to make even the simplest moments seem special. He wondered what she was doing if she thought of him too. Days passed, and slowly John began to accept Claire's absence. He threw himself even more into work, finding a new appreciation for the environment around him. He made new friends, but Claire's memory was always there, like a silent shadow. That girl had captivated him since the first time he saw her, and because of this loneliness, he decided it was time to leave that place and explore new corners of the Amazon. After communicating the elderly couple owners of the hostel, he packed his things ready to leave the next day. That night, as he prepared to go to sleep for the last time in the small room that had been his home, he heard a soft knock on the hostel door. Surprised, John opened it and saw, to his immense surprise, Claire standing there, with a shy smile on her face. "Claire," he said, incredulous. "What are you doing here?" She smiled more broadly.
John.
"I'm back." John invited her in, still not believing she was really there. They sat in the courtyard, and Claire began to explain. "My mother went back to France," she said, her eyes shining in the lamplight. "But I felt like I hadn't finished my journey here yet, so I decided to stay a while longer." John couldn't contain the joy he felt. "Me? I don't believe it. I'm so glad you're back, Claire." She laughed softly. "And you? Where are you going?" John took a deep breath, thinking about the sudden change in his plans. "I was about to leave the hostel. I leave tomorrow. My bags are ready, but I didn't have a specific destination in mind. I was thinking of exploring other parts of Brazil, maybe traveling through South America. What about you?" "I need to take a break from all the hustle and bustle. I want to live in the bush. Do you want to go with me?" John asked, feeling a warmth flood his chest. The idea of continuing his adventures with Claire seemed like a dream come true. "Of course, Claire. I'd love to. Traveling with you would be an amazing experience." The two spent the evening talking about their plans, about the places they wanted to visit, the things they wanted to see. Each new idea increased the excitement of both. That night, John could barely close his eyes. When the sun finally began to rise, John and Claire were already ready. The couple who ran the hostel said goodbye warmly, wishing them luck and promising to keep in touch. John, with his backpack on his back and Claire by his side, looked out into the forest one last time, feeling deep gratitude for all that had lived there. As they walked to the riverside where they would take the boat, John felt a mixture of anxiety and happiness. The river, with its serene waters and golden reflections of the rising sun, seemed a perfect symbol of the new beginning that awaited them. On the boat as they glided through the waters, Claire said, "Thank you for letting me go with you," she said, her eyes reflecting the morning glow. "I couldn't imagine doing this without you. I can't wait to see what the future holds." During the trip, they continued to share stories, plans, and dreams. The bond that was already strong became even deeper, and John realized that with Claire by his side, anywhere in the world would be a place to call home. They arrived in Manaus with their hearts full of expectations. The city, with its vibrant chaos and its unique blend of cultures, seemed like the perfect first step to his new adventure. And from there they chose the next destination. It would be in Para, down the imposing Amazon River. On the first night, as the sun set and dyed the sky orange and pink, John and Claire decided to explore the boat. After setting up their hammock, they sat in a common area on the top floor of the huge boat, the Taker, where several passengers were gathered. There, they met Marcos, a young fisherman from Para who was returning home after a season of work in Manaus. "Hello, are you also going to alter from the ground?" asked Marcos, with a friendly smile. "Yes," Claire replied, excited. "We are exploring the Amazon. What about you?" "I'm coming home. I work in Manaus, but my family is in Alter do Chao," explained Marcos. "It's a beautiful place. You'll love it." Another passenger, an elderly lady named Dona Marlene, joined the conversation. She was going to visit her sister in Santarém. "Alter from the floor is really special," she said. "Rio's beaches are beautiful, and the local culture is rich and welcoming." John was interested. "What do you recommend we do when we get there?" Mark thought for a moment. "Well, you guys need to visit Love Island. It is a paradise beach, and if you can, take a boat trip through the creeks. The nature there is impressive," Dona Marlene added. "And don't forget to sample the local cuisine. The baked fish and tacacá are delicious." As the evening wore on, John and Claire continued to talk with Marcos and Dona Marlene, learning more about their lives and stories of those people. The atmosphere on the boat was sinclairdigum, and the exchange of experiences made the trip even more enriching. In a moment of relaxation, Claire and John were at the bow of the boat, watching the stars. It's amazing how endless this river seems, Claire said, clairvoyantly. Every curve reveals something new. John agreed, feeling deeply connected to the nature around him. And to think that this river is the life of so many people. It's like an artery that keeps everything pulsing. Claire then stopped looking at John and told him, I feel like I want to kiss you, but I don't know if that's too good or too bad, and I'm afraid. John then, without thinking straight about the answer, said, Don't worry, we have time for that. And at that moment, as if it were part of the indelible network of stars, something broke, as if the connection between them had come undone and all that game of attraction had come undone. Claire agreed and went to read to sleep, while John remained static, unable to believe his own answer, since his greatest desire was to kiss her, and he felt it from the moment he saw her for the first time. In the morning, the boat sailed smoothly through the calm waters of the Amazon River, lulling its passengers into a deep sleep. The rhythmic sound of the waters and the constant hum of the boat's engine created a hypnotic melody that enveloped everyone. When the first ray of sunlight broke through the cracks in the cabin of the boat, John woke up. The smell of fresh coffee wafted through the air, whetting his appetite. He stretched out and looked at Claire, who was still sleeping peacefully in the hammock next to him and was momentarily disturbed to see her. He got up carefully, trying not to wake her, and went to the deck to breathe in the fresh morning air. The river, bathed in the soft light of dawn, looked like a sea of liquid gold. John took a deep breath, feeling refreshed. Sometime later, Claire appeared next to him. She looked calm, but there was something in her eyes that John hadn't noticed before. They grabbed 2 cups of coffee and sat on the deck, enjoying the calm of the morning. Did you sleep well? John asked, trying to start a casual conversation. Yes, I slept, but I had a lot of thoughts during the night, Claire replied. Looking at the horizon, John could see the hesitation in her voice. Is everything all right, Claire? It seems that something is bothering you. She sighed deeply, holding the coffee cup with both hands. I need to tell you something, John. It's something I should have said before, but I didn't know how. John was silent, waiting for her to continue. I have a boyfriend in France, Claire began, looking away. We're not officially done. When I decided to come to the Amazon with my mother, it was kind of an escape. We were going through a difficult time, and I needed some time to think. John felt a twinge of surprise and, in a way, disappointment. Did you run away from him? Claire nodded. Yes. I was confused and didn't know what to do. I needed space to clear my mind. But now, after all we've lived here, I feel like I need to sort it out. I'm thinking of calling him when we get to Alter from the ground. John looked at the river, processing the information. And you still have feelings for him? I don't know, Claire replied, her voice heavy with uncertainty. Part of me feels like I still love him, but another part is drawn to the freedom and new experiences I'm having here. John felt his heart race. Claire, I understand that you need to sort this out. I can't ask you to ignore his feelings or his story, but know that I am here for you no matter what you decide. Claire smiled sadly. Thank you, John. I just need time to think and sort things out. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. John understood the complexity of the situation and knew he needed to give Claire space to find her own answers. The journey proceeded, and although Claire's revelation hung in the air, John and Claire continued to enjoy the journey down the river. They explored the boat, interacted with other passengers, and absorbed the beauty around them. But there was a tacit understanding that something important needed to be worked out. That afternoon, as they sat on the deck, watching the forest go by, Joachim, the tour guide they had met, joined them. He noticed the tension between the two and, with his quiet wisdom, tried to lighten the mood. Sometimes travel is more about finding answers within than discovering new places, Joachim said with a knowing smile. The paths we choose are reflections of the choices we make in our lives. Claire looked at him, surprised by the depth of his words. You're right, Joaquin. This trip has been more about self-discovery than I imagined. Joaquin nodded. Amazon has a way of showing us what really matters. Take the time you have here to find your answers. And John, what are you afraid of? Why can't you enjoy life? John looked at him confused, but nodded without answering. Finally, after the 2 days on the boat, the village of Alter du Chau appeared on the horizon. The view of the white sandy beaches and crystal clear waters was breathtaking. The boat docked and the passengers began to disembark. John and Claire grabbed their bags and got off the boat. Claire looked nervous but determined. It was late afternoon and people were heading out for their own lives, while Marcos warned them that the bus to Alter would be leaving soon. Just a minute. She walked away and found a quiet place, away from the noise and bustle, and dialed her boyfriend's number in France, Claire said. Meanwhile, John walked, trying to remain calm and hopeful that regardless of the outcome, things would work out in the best possible way. Claire didn't say what they talked about, just rumbled to Alter from the floor without exchanging many words. The disembarkation was lively, with all passengers helping each other down with their luggage. Marcos said goodbye with a warm hug. "I hope to see you around. You will love my land." The village of Alter du Chao welcomed them with its quiet streets and cozy atmosphere. The promise of new adventures and discoveries was in the air. After arriving, they went straight to the local market to buy supplies. The locals were friendly, and John and Claire soon felt welcome. They bought fresh fruits, fish, and other camp essentials. With everything ready, they took a small boat and went to the island. The villa was even more stunning than they had imagined. The white sand contrasted with the green and blue waters, creating a breathtaking backdrop. They chose a spot near the water's edge to pitch their tents. While John set up the tents, Claire prepared a small fire to cook dinner. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The setting was idyllic, but there was a palpable tension in the air. After dinner, they sat around the fire. The crackling of flames and the sound of gentle waves created an almost magical atmosphere. Claire was quiet, visibly anxious. "John," she began, breaking the silence. "I called my boyfriend, like I told you I would." John felt his stomach turn, but kept a calm expression. "And how was it?" Claire stared into the flames, avoiding his gaze. "It was difficult. We talked for a long time. He was upset and confused, but understood why I needed this time. In the end, we decided that he will come to Brazil. We will meet in Bethlehem in a few weeks." John felt as if the ground had disappeared under his feet. He had prepared for this possibility, but hearing Claire's words made it painfully real. Still, he smiled and nodded, hiding his true feelings. "I understand," he said, his voice firmer than it felt. "I hope you can solve everything." Claire finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty and sadness. "John, I didn't want to hurt you. You mean a lot to me. This trip has been amazing because of you." John took a deep breath, struggling to keep his composure. "Claire, you need to do what's best for you. And if it means finding a solution with him, then I support you." She reached out and held his hand. "Thank you, John. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to enjoy every moment we still have together." John shook her hand, feeling a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Let's do it then. Seize the moment." The night wore on, and despite the painful revelation, John and Claire tried to keep the mood light. They talked about their adventures and future plans, laughed at the little things, and enjoyed the beauty around them. However, the shadow of Claire's future meeting with her boyfriend hung over them. Later, as they lay in their tents, John looked up at the starry sky, feeling a deep melancholy. He knew that time with Claire was running out, and the thought of losing her was overwhelming. Still, he pledged to make the next few weeks the best they could be. The dawn brought a new energy. They decided to explore the island, swim in the crystal clear waters, and hike the trails. Every moment was an attempt to create happy memories, to forget, even temporarily, what was to come. John realized that despite his pain, he needed to be strong for Claire. She was in a moment of transition, and he wanted to be a support, not a burden. As they walked along the beach, he held her hand and smiled, determined to make the best of those final moments together. And it was there that John and Claire met Albernato, a native of Alter du Chao. Albernato was a middle-aged man with suntanned skin and an infectious smile. He ran a campsite not far from there and approached the two as they rested on the beach. "Hi, I'm Albernato," he said, with a friendly nod. "I noticed you guys are camping here. If you want a more comfortable place, I have a campsite nearby. You are more than welcome." John and Claire looked at each other, surprised by the kind offer. "That would be great," John replied. "Thank you very much for the invitation." Albernato smiled. "No problem. Come on, I'll show you the way." The Albernato campsite was lovely. Surrounded by tall trees and colorful flowers, there were several comfortable tents and a common area with hammocks and a fire pit. Albernato lived in a small hut next to the campsite and made a point of receiving. "You can stay here as long as you want," Albernato said, as he showed her around. "We have fresh water, a small shower, and a communal kitchen. In the evening, we make a fire, and everyone gathers to tell stories." John and Claire were delighted with the simplicity and beauty of the place. They decided to accept the offer, and after setting up their things in the new tent, they began to get acquainted with the other guests and Albernato himself. The days at the Albernato campsite were filled with activities and conversations. John and Claire helped Albernato with various tasks, such as collecting firewood, cooking and keeping the place clean. In return, Albernato let them stay there. One night, as they gathered around the campfire, Albernato told a story about the importance of inner strength. The Amazon teaches a lot about resilience and adaptation, he said. The trees here are strong because they have learned to bend in the wind, to withstand storms. We humans need to learn this too. That night, Claire and John were alone at the campfire. It was already dawn as they talked, she said. John, sometimes I feel like you struggle to demonstrate your strength. John, taken by surprise, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and sadness. What do you mean? Claire sighed, choosing her words carefully. You have incredible strength, John. I see it in you. But sometimes it feels like you hide when the going gets tough. It's like you don't want to face the pain head on. You're strong, but you haven't realized it yet. She smiled and held his hand. I believe in you, John. John slept with a heavy heart, weighing himself for not having her. And Claire slept confused, feeling in love with John, but without the courage to leave her boyfriend. The next morning, on a sunny Saturday morning, they decided to go shopping in the nearby small town to replenish their supplies, took a bus there. After finishing shopping at the local fair, they decided to try a ride down the road, and so they waited with their fingers raised on the side of the road. That's when a combi stopped. Inside it was a couple. The couple introduced themselves as Daniel and Sophia, and the curious little boy inside was their son Lucas. Claire joined the group, delighted by the warm energy emanating from them. Are you camping here too? Daniel nodded. Yes, we are traveling all over Brazil. What about you? We're at the Albernato campsite, not far from here, John replied. Why don't you join us today? We were planning to visit some nearby waterfalls. It would be great to have company. Sophia looked at Daniel and Lucas, who were already excited about the idea of exploring new places with new friends. It would be Clara Vilhoso. We accept your invitation, John, she replied with a grateful smile. And so, the group of 5 headed for the waterfalls, guided by the gentle sound of running water and the promise of breathtaking views. During the walk, they shared stories of past trips, laughter, and simple joys of being together in nature. Arriving at the waterfalls, the scenery was breathtaking. Crystal clear waters tumbling into natural pools surrounded by mossy rocks. Everyone cooled off in the cool water, explored the surrounding trails, and simply enjoyed the moment of peace. As night fell, they decided it would be better to spend the night there, near the waterfall, instead of returning to the campsite. They set up their tents in a safe and cozy place, sharing a simple dinner in the light of the stars. Sitting around the crackling fire, Claire began to ramble on about her life, saying it's amazing how life can surprise us. Claire commented, looking up at the starry sky. When we decided to leave the house this morning, I never imagined that we would meet such amazing people and have such a special day. That night, while Claire talked about her past, everyone went to sleep, leaving only John, who listened to her ramblings. At the end, she asked if she had gone too far. John replies that yes, but that he had enjoyed hearing it. That night they slept together in the tent, and although if they wanted, nothing happened between them. The next morning, as they dismantled their tents and prepared to leave, John and Claire invited Daniel, Sophia, and Lucas to visit the Albernato campsite before heading home. And so they decided to go there together. After spending the night at the waterfalls, John, Claire, Daniel, Sophia, and little Lucas headed to the Albernato campsite together. The way back was filled with lively conversations, laughter, and also the sound of feet crushing dry leaves on the forest floor. Upon arriving at the campsite, they were greeted by the serene beauty of the place. The tall, green trees, fresh air, and soothing sound of the nearby creek created a perfect environment to rest and reconnect. Daniel and Sophia were delighted with the place, while Lucas ran, exploring every corner with curiosity. Welcome to our refuge, said John, with a welcoming smile. At nightfall, everyone gathered around a large bonfire, where the stories and laughter continued under the starry sky. Later, when everyone began to retreat to their tents, Claire looked thoughtful. John noticed her expression and suggested they take a walk before bed. They walked to a more secluded area of the campsite, where the moon shone brightly, illuminating their faces. You look worried, Claire, John said softly, trying to probe what was going on in her mind. Want to talk about it? Claire sighed, feeling a mixture of relief and hesitation.
John, I'm confused.
I feel like I'm living in 2 different worlds. John, trying to keep his tone light, asked, what worlds would these be? She stopped and looked straight into John's eyes. You're not stupid, John. No need to pretend you don't understand. John swallowed hard, feeling the tension in the air. Claire, I just want to understand what's bothering you. She drew closer, her gaze intense. I am torn between the world I knew before you and the world I am living in now with you. It's like I'm trying to reconcile two different lives. John was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Claire, I just want you to know that I'm here for you, in whatever world you choose to live. I love you. They returned to the tent, where they lay side by side, in a silence charged with unspoken feelings. When the lights went out and darkness took over, Claire turned to John, her eyes meeting his in the gloom. Without needing any more words, they approached, letting their bodies speak for them. That night, John and Claire finally gave themselves to each other, making love with an intensity and tenderness that reflected all the confusion, passion, and love they felt. The tent, warmed by the closeness of their bodies, became a sanctuary where nothing else mattered but being together. Then, lying hand in hand, they felt each other's warmth and gentle breathing. Claire knew that no matter what world she felt torn into, at that moment, standing next to John was where she belonged. And so they fell asleep, secure in the love they shared. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight penetrated the tent, waking John and Claire. They looked at each other, a mixture of happiness and concern in their eyes. Last night's peace seemed to be only a brief respite before the coming storm. As they started to get up, Claire's phone rang, breaking the morning silence. She looked at the screen and saw her boyfriend's name. Taking a deep breath, he answered the call. Hi, love, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Claire, where are you?
I'm worried.
Why haven't you answered my messages? The boyfriend's voice sounded worried on the other end of the line. John left the tent confused by everything that had happened. After a few long minutes, Claire finally came out of the tent saying, John, my boyfriend is coming over here. We need to move away. We can't be together anymore. John felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under his feet. Claire, I understand. If this is what you need, I will respect it. She held his hand, tears glistening in her eyes. I didn't want it to happen like this, but I need to sort out my life, understand my feelings. With a lump in his throat, John nodded. I just want you to be happy, Claire. If that means walking away, then that's what we'll do. They packed their things in silence, every move charged with a palpable sadness. John decided that he would leave immediately, giving Claire the space she needed to resolve her situation. Daniel and Sophia noticed the tension in the air and got closer. Is everything okay? Sophia asked, worried. John forced a smile. Yeah, we just need some time apart. I'm leaving now. After a last, long hug, John said goodbye to Claire with a heavy heart. As he walked away from the campsite, he felt a mixture of pain and resignation. He knew he needed to give Claire the space she needed, even if it meant breaking her heart completely. Claire watched John walk away, a part of herself wanting to run after him, but knowing she had to face her own feelings and decisions. Her boyfriend's return to Brazil would bring new complications, and she needed to be ready to deal with it. And so, with heavy hearts and an uncertain future, John and Claire went their separate ways, each carrying the memories of those moments together as a reminder of what could have been and the complexity of human feelings. After saying goodbye to Claire at the Albernado campsite, John decided to stay in Brazil for some more time. He needed a space to process everything that had happened and find meaning in his feelings. Feeling lonely and searching for new airs, he decided to travel to the island of Clarejo, a place of wild beauty and tranquility in that same state, further down the Amazon River. The trip to Clarejo brought temporary relief to John's heavy heart. The lush landscapes, pristine beaches, and rich local culture were a balm for his soul. However, the shadow of what happened to Claire still hung over him. One afternoon, while walking along the beach, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw Claire's name. With a mixture of anxiety and hope, he answered the call. Claire, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. How are you? Hi, John. Her voice sounded soft, with a mixture of longing and sadness. I am dealing with everything. I've thought about you a lot in the last few days. John took a deep breath, feeling a lump form in his throat. I thought a lot about you too, Claire. How are things with your boyfriend? She hesitated before answering. It's been difficult. He arrived yesterday and we are trying to talk, sort things out, but I can't get you out of my head. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken feelings. John closed his eyes, trying to absorb her words. Claire, I just want you to be happy, regardless of where it takes us. I know, John, and that means a lot to me. I just wanted things to be different. They talked for a few more minutes, exchanging words of comfort and longing. When the call ended, John felt a mixture of relief and sadness. There were still so many unresolved things between them. Later that night, while in his simple room at the inn, John received a message from an unknown number. As he opened it, his heart sank to see that it was Claire's boyfriend's. "John, this is Claire's boyfriend. I know about what happened between you. Please let her go. She is trying to sort out her life, and his presence only confuses her more. Let her move on." John stared at the message for a long time. I knew the request was reasonable, but that didn't make things any easier. With a deep sigh, he answered briefly, "I understand. I will respect your wishes. I hope she finds the happiness she deserves." After sending the message, John felt an even greater weight on his heart. I knew I needed to give Claire the space she needed to sort out her life, even if it meant giving up what they had started to build. In the days that followed, John tried to focus on the beauty and culture of the island of Clarejo. He visited local communities, learned about the simple life of the locals, and found some solace in the nature around him. The island, with its serenity and beauty, has become a place of reflection and healing. Although the pain of separation was still present, John knew he needed to move on. Life was made of hard choices, and he had to believe that in the end, everyone would find their way. It was during these days that he realized that he needed to return to the United States and live life again on soil already known to him. He needed friendly shoulders at that moment, and Brazil could not offer him any of this. Back in his everyday life, John found a new purpose: to write novels. Love, disappointment, and the intensity of his feelings for Claire gave real outlines to their stories. The words flowed from his mind and heart to the paper, each character and plot reflecting bits of his own emotional journey. The months passed quickly. John's stories began to come to life in ebooks being published, with readers connecting deeply with the raw and authentic emotions he captured in his books. Writing became a form of therapy, helping him process everything he had lived through and the pain he still felt. 9 months after the last contact with Claire, on a quiet autumn morning, John's phone vibrated with a message. He looked at the screen and with surprise saw Claire's name. Hesitantly, he opened the message. "John, I hope you're okay. I know it's been a long time since we talked, but I felt I needed to write you. I want to apologize for all the confusion I've caused in your life. It was a difficult and complex time for me, and I know it wasn't fair to you, but I want you to know that I am grateful for your existence in my life. You showed me a side of myself that I didn't know, and for that I will be forever grateful. I hope you have found the peace and happiness you deserve. Love, Claire." John read the message several times, each word bringing a mixture of emotions. He felt a sense of relief when he realized that Claire was trying to find her own way, and that despite the pain they both felt, she also found something valuable in the experience. With a sad smile, John took out his notebook and began to write a response. "Claire, thank you for your words. They mean a lot to me. I have also gone through a process of reflection and growth since we said goodbye. The pain we feel has taken us to unexpected places, and for that I am grateful. Writing has become a way of understanding and processing everything, and so, in a way, you remain present in my life. I wish you all the happiness and clarity to move forward. Love, John." He looked at the autumn landscape through the window, the leaves falling gently, symbolizing change and renewal. With a lighter heart and a clearer mind, John continued to write, knowing that each new day brought the promise of new stories and new beginnings. As the months and years passed, John plunged deep into his writing career. Each new novel he wrote reflected a piece of his soul, and he quickly established himself as a respected and admired author. His books, charged with emotion and authenticity, have won readers around the world. Although contact with Claire gradually decreased until it was completely extinguished, she never left her thoughts. The memories of his brief but intense history with her served as an inexhaustible source of inspiration. In many of her novels, characters and plots inspired by Claire and the complexity of her feelings found life on the pages. Over the years, John continued to build his writing career, more and more firmly establishing himself in the literary world. His stories touched hearts, and his fame grew with each new release. At one of these literary conferences, he met someone who would change his life in unexpected ways. During a lecture on the importance of emotions in writing, John noticed a woman in the audience who seemed especially interested in his words. After the lecture, she came over to greet him. Her name was Camille, a book publisher with a watchful eye and a welcoming smile. "I loved your talk, John," Camille said, holding out her hand. "You really understand how to convey emotions through words." John smiled, shaking her hand. "Thank you, Camille. I'm glad you liked it." From this meeting, John and Camille began to spend more time together, discovering common interests and sharing their passions for literature. Camille was smart, funny, and had an adventurous spirit that complemented John's introspective nature. Over time, their friendship blossomed into a deep and loving relationship. John found in Camille a companionship he hadn't expected, a new source of inspiration and joy. A few years later, they married in an intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Their love became even stronger with the birth of their son, Noah. Noah's arrival brought a new dimension to John's life. He marveled at the joy and responsibility of being a parent, finding new forms of inspiration in every moment shared with his son. John, Camille, and Noah lived together in a cozy house in the suburbs, where the years passed quickly, full of laughter, challenges, and growth. John continued to write, now with new stories inspired by the experience of being a father and husband. His novels became even richer and deeper, reflecting the fullness of his life. One night, while putting Noah to sleep, Camille entered the room, watching John as he sang a lullaby to Noah. He loves it when you sing to him, she said softly, smiling. John looked at Camille, love for her evident in his eyes. And I love every moment with you, he replied, pulling her into a hug. The years continued to pass, and John watched Noah grow up, following his son's every achievement and challenge with pride. He and Camille found a serene happiness in their life together, appreciating the small and big things they built as a family. John's life was complete, filled with the love of his wife and son, and the satisfaction of following his passion for writing. And although the memories of the past were still present, he knew that the present and the future next to Camille and Noah were the greatest blessing he could have. One day, while attending a book signing in a crowded bookstore in New York, John found himself reflecting on how everything had changed since his return from Brazil. He watched the line of readers eager for a word or an autograph, feeling deep gratitude for the path his life had taken. After the session, John returned home, a mixture of tiredness and satisfaction in his heart. He picked up a copy of his first novel, the one he had started shortly after returning from Brazil, and flipped through the pages. The words, so full of pain and hope, still resonated with the same force as when he wrote them. In one of these moments of reflection, John realized that despite all the successes and breakthroughs in his career, Claire would always be a significant part of his journey. She represented not only a passion from the past, but also a catalyst for her personal and professional transformation, although she was already buried in the very distant past. One day, while reviewing the manuscript of his latest book, John received an unexpected email. It was an offer to turn one of his novels into a movie. The news brought a new wave of enthusiasm and motivation. He knew this opportunity would open even more doors and bring his stories to an even larger audience. Over time, John's fame continued to grow. He gave interviews, attended literary conferences, and saw his books win prestigious awards. Yet amid all the success, he always found moments to remember Claire, their brief stint together, and how that experience shaped his life. But he also loved Camille and had deep respect for her. In these moments, he tried to forget about Claire, although more than 20 years later, she still insisted on returning to his mind. John knew in a way that this was part of the natural cycle of life. People move in and out of our lives, leaving indelible marks, and even if they are no longer physically present, their influence continues to be felt. On silent nights, when John sat at his writing desk, he sometimes found himself looking at a photograph of Marajo Island, a reminder of the journey that led him there. And with a deep sigh, he returned to writing, forever grateful for the complexity of life and the people who crossed his path, shaping and inspiring him at every step. Claire, in turn, continued her artistic career in Paris. She became a renowned painter, with her works being exhibited in prestigious galleries around the world. Although his professional life was a success, his heart still carried the mark of John. She married a musician named Pierre, and they had a daughter together. Even with a loving family, Claire often thought about the long-ago trip and John. The painting he made of him remained in his home, a constant reminder of lost love, and the two, even without any contact, remained still united by a tenuous thread of the time they spent together in Brazil. Years passed, and John and Claire grew older, each following their life journey. In moments of solitude, both allowed themselves to remember those magical summer days. John often wondered if Claire still thought about him, and Claire, while painting, imagined how John would be. Both felt life moving forward, but their memories remained alive. John often revised the sketch, while Claire added touches of nostalgia in her works, inspired by that unforgettable encounter. A lot of time had passed and John became a recognized writer, publishing several novels that won the hearts of many readers, being invited to Europe where he gave several lectures and book launches. Although Camille was a devoted wife, she realized there was something in John she could never reach, a part of him that was always distant, lost in thoughts of a distant past. She thought it was because of the writing. Claire, at the same time, traveled the world for exhibitions, but always felt that something was missing from her travels. Pierre was an understanding husband, but he also noticed the melancholy Claire carried. She channeled this misunderstood pain into her paintings, creating works that touched people deeply. Despite the filled lives and achievements, John and Claire always felt an emptiness, an unfulfilled desire that silently accompanied them. Not that they did not love and be together with their companions, but that was a power far greater than they themselves could comprehend. Years passed, and John's life was filled with moments of joy and challenges. He and Camille raised Noah with love and dedication, watching him grow and walk his own path. John's career as a writer continued to thrive, and he became a respected figure in the literary world. But life has also brought its share of sorrows. When John turned 60, Camille passed away after a brief and unexpected illness that took her within a few months. The loss of Camille left John devastated. He found himself alone in a house filled with memories, feeling an emptiness he had never experienced before. As time went on, John realized that he needed to find a way to move forward. The pain of Camille's loss was deep, but he knew she would want him to continue to live fully. Feeling the need to change scenery and seek some comfort, he decided to return to travel, something he had not done for many years, not freely, only to work commitments. And in a way, Brazil, with all its memories and meanings, seemed the most appropriate destination. It was not the hope of finding Claire again or reliving the past that drove him, but the strange comfort of nostalgia. Brazil represented a transformative moment in his life, and he felt that perhaps he could find some peace upon returning. Arriving in Brazil, John was immediately enveloped by the familiarity of the sights, sounds, and smells. He decided to revisit Marajo Island, where he had found some solace years ago. The island, with its wild beauty and tranquility, seemed like the perfect place to reflect and find a new purpose. As he walked along the white sandy beaches, John felt a mixture of longing and serenity. The waves gently breaking on the shore, the singing of birds, and the cozy smile of local residents offered him much-needed comfort. And he felt in his own walk that time had indeed been unforgiving. During his stay on the island, John spent hours writing in his diary, recording his reflections and feelings. He found inspiration in the lush landscapes and simplicity of local life. Memories of the past came up occasionally, but not as a burden, but as important parts of his journey. One afternoon, while watching the sunset, John met an old fisherman, Paul. The two spent hours talking about life. "The Maharajo is really charming," said Paulo with a warm smile. "Everyone feels at peace here." John nodded, looking at the horizon. "There is something about this place that brings me comfort. Maybe it's nostalgia, or maybe it's the simplicity of life here. Anyway, I'm grateful to be back." Paul looked at him with understanding. "Life is made of cycles, my friend. Sometimes we need to revisit the past to find strength for the future." The days on Marajo Island passed slowly, each one bringing a new discovery and a new moment of reflection. John knew life without Camille would be different, but he also knew he could find a new form of happiness by honoring the memories and living in the present with gratitude. After finding some peace and inspiration on Marajo Island, John felt a more intense wave of nostalgia. He then decided to travel to Alter do Chão, the place where so many meaningful memories had been formed. The decision to revisit the Albernado campsite, a place that marked a crucial period of his life, seemed inevitable. Arriving in Alter from the ground, John was immediately captured by the beauty of the place. The white sand beaches, crystal clear Tapajos river waters, and lush vegetation were still as enchanting as he remembered. He felt a mixture of excitement and longing as he made his way to the campsite. Upon arriving at the Albernado campsite, he noticed that the place still retained the same rustic charm, albeit with some signs of the passing of the years. The campsite was well maintained, with several tents scattered around the grounds, a few huts, and a cozy atmosphere that seemed to invite you to stay. John was greeted by Albernado, now a 75-year-old gentleman, but still with the same vivacious look and warm smile he remembered. Albernado, with white hair and slower steps, recognized John immediately. "John, are you yourself?" Albernado asked, with a surprised smile. "How long has it been, boy? It's good to see you again." John smiled, immediately feeling at ease. "Yes, Albernado, it's me. It's been many years, but I've never forgotten this place." The two men sat in the shade of a tree, where they talked for hours. John told about his life since he had last been there, about his writing career, the loss of Camille and his son Noah. Albernado, for his part, talked about how the campsite had held up over the years, about the travelers who came and went, and about the changes he had seen in Alter Du Chao. "This place has always been special to me," John said, looking around with a nostalgic look. "Coming back here is like going back in time." Albernato nodded. "There's something about Alter Du Chao's simplicity and beauty that touches people in a unique way. I'm glad you found some peace here." John decided to stay at the campsite for a few weeks, immersing himself in the tranquility and natural beauty of the place. During the day, he explored the beaches and forests around, writing down his impressions and memories in a notebook. In the evenings, he would sit with Albernato and other travelers, sharing stories around the campfire. One night, while watching the stars shine in the clear sky, John felt a deep sense of peace. He realized that while he had lived through many losses and challenges, he had also found incredible beauty and meaning along the way. Nostalgia was not only a painful reminder of the past, but also a celebration of the experiences that shaped it. John decided that he would write a new book inspired by his journey back to Brazil and the memories that were being relived. He knew the story would be a tribute not only to his own past, but also to the beauty of places like Alter Du Chao and the people who crossed his path. As the days quietly turned into weeks, John felt rejuvenated. The connection with nature, the company of Albernato, and the simplicity of camping helped him find a new balance. He knew he would eventually return to the United States, but now with a lighter heart and a new source of inspiration. On the last night before leaving, John and Albernato sat by the river, watching the sunset. "Thanks for everything, Albernato," John said. "This place will always be special to me." Albernato smiled. "It was a pleasure, John. Remember, you will always have a place here in Alter Du Chao. Come back anytime." John said goodbye to Albernato and went towards the pier, where the boats would follow to Manaus, and from there he could catch a flight back to the United States. While John travels around Brazil, Claire, who for a while, it seemed that she had found stability and happiness, came across other plans in her life. After several years of marriage, Claire and her husband separated, and Claire found herself feeling strange in recent months, as if her heart was propelling her away from Europe. The breakup left Claire with a feeling of emptiness and confusion. She found herself often reflecting on the choices she had made and the paths she had not followed. Among these reflections, a specific memory always emerged with surprising clarity: his adventure in Brazil with John. The nostalgia of these memories began to grow inside her, turning into an irresistible desire to revisit the country that had left such an indelible mark on her heart. It wasn't just about John, although he was a significant part of those memories. It was about the feeling of freedom, the wild beauty of nature, and the simplicity of life she had experienced there. Determined to find some kind of resolution, or maybe just a fresh start, Claire decided to follow the impulse and travel to Brazil. With a mixture of anxiety and excitement, she boarded a plane, her heart pounding with anticipation of what she might find. Upon landing on Brazilian soil, Claire was greeted by the warmth and vibrant energy of the country. Taking a deep breath, she felt a sense of familiarity that comforted her immediately. Their final destination was Alter Du Chao, the place where so many important memories had been formed. As the plane flew over the verdant landscape and meandering rivers, Claire found herself reflecting on her life and her choices. "I thought of John and how that brief but intense period with him had left a lasting impression." She also thought about the marriage that ended and the lessons she'd learned about herself over the years. Maybe this trip is a way to close a chapter, Claire thought. Or maybe it's a chance to start something new. Arriving in Manaus, Claire was overcome by a wave of emotions. And from there almost immediately, she took the first boat to Alter Du Chao, towards Santarém. Claire spotted Santarém from afar on the boat, with a mix of nostalgia and hope. The city was vibrant as she remembered it, with its unique energy and the welcoming warmth of the people. Absorbing the familiar sounds and smells, she felt a sense of peace. "I was ready to move on to Alter the floor." It was the same day John was preparing to leave Alter off the ground after his nostalgic stay. He felt that he had found a new peace and clarity and was ready to return to the United States and continue his life. However, a persistent feeling that something was about to happen accompanied him as he waited for the boat that would take him to Manaus. John waited patiently for his boat, while Claire waited for the boat to stop to descend. That's when the boat finally docked, and as Claire descended, John prepared to climb aboard. And it was at this very moment, after long 40 years, that the eyes of both met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Memories of past years surfaced, and both found themselves transported back to those days when their lives first intersected. John was the first to move. With determined steps, he dropped his suitcase on the floor and ran through the people towards Claire, his heart pounding. When he finally stood before her, they both smiled, still stunned by the coincidence of their reunion. "Claire," John said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Me. I can't believe it's you." "John," Claire replied, feeling a surge of emotions. "After all these years, what are you doing here?" John smiled, a little awkwardly. "I came here for a little peace and nostalgia, but I seem to have found something much more valuable." Claire nodded, still processing the gaping moment. "Me too. I was reliving some memories and trying to find clarity." Claire was still as beautiful as John remembered, her hair now gray, but with the same sparkle in her eyes. "Claire!" He could hardly believe it. He approached, and both stood still for a moment, just looking at each other. There was then a moment of silence, full of unspoken meanings. Finally, John made a decision. "Claire, I need to say something. During all these 40 years, I have never stopped thinking about you. I have always loved you, even from a distance, even with the passage of time. And now, seeing you here, I realize that I cannot make the same mistakes again." Claire looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "John, I thought of you too, often, but life has taken us on different paths." John took a step closer, holding his hands. "That can't be bad, Claire. I will always want to kiss you, love you. And no matter how much time passes, that feeling won't change. Regardless if you don't want me, that's how I feel." Claire felt the weight of his words and, at the same time, the lightness of a truth as deep as it was simple. She smiled, finally letting a lonely tear run down her face. "John, me? I love you too. I've always loved you. Maybe we're here now because it's the right time for us." John pulled Claire into a tight hug, feeling a wave of relief and happiness. "Let's do it right this time. No matter what the future brings, I want to be by your side." The two stood there, hugging in the midst of the arriving and departing people, while the world around them continued to spin. For John and Claire, that moment was a convergence of all the paths they had traveled during 4 endless decades. It was the chance to start over and live the love that had never disappeared. And so together they decided that they would not leave fate to chance. John stayed, and they set out together to rediscover Brazil, not as two nostalgic souls, but as two hearts that have finally found their way back to each other after so long apart. Thank you very much to those who have supported the channel financially through the link in the comment pinned. This helps me to bring more and more stories to you. And don't forget to like and also subscribe to continue receiving the new stories.